Good evening, brothers and sisters. How are you doing? I hope that you had a great day, and I hope that you were productive. So today we are in the Book of Omni. Now, the Book of Omni is a multi-generational book. Within it, we have three generations. We have Omni, who is the great-grandson of Jacob. We have Amram, which is the son of Amram and Chemish, both are the sons of Omni. And then we have a Benadam, which is Chemish's son. And also a Benadam lived at the same time as King Mosiah the First, and we'll read about him in a little while. And then Amaleki, he is the son of Abinadam, which he was alive when Mosiah became king and when his son Benjamin became king. And so we'll read all about this, and it's spanning, if you look at under the chapter heading, it covers almost 200 years. So that's a long time, and it's so little that I wish we had more records of what was going on at this time. It's a fascinating period. So let's do some major time jumping and start reading Omni. All right, to start off, Omni introduces himself. He says he was commanded by his father, Jerem, that he should write on these plates to preserve their genealogy. And this is a first. So he's just keeping this record because his father told him to. Verse 2, he says, I myself am a wicked man. I have not kept the statutes and the commandments of the Lord as I ought to have done. And then he goes on to record that there's been wars and contentions in the past 270 years. And he considers these as keeping the plates, keeping a record of the plates by writing basically 3 paragraphs or 3 sentences, 3 verses. And then he says he's handing them to his son Amram. And Amram, he writes 4 verses, 5. He starts off by introducing himself. And then he says it's 320 years had passed. The more wicked part of the Nephites have been destroyed. He goes in to continue. He says, the Lord would not suffer after being taken the people out of Jerusalem. He says that inasmuch as ye shall not keep my commandments, ye shall not prosper in the land. He records in verse 7, he says, the Lord did visit them in great judgment. Nevertheless, he did spare the righteous, that they should not perish, but did deliver them out of the hands of their enemies. See, we have so much history just right here in verse 6 or verse 7, and we don't have their record. I really want to know more about the Nephites and Lamanites and stuff, and if the Lord would grant my wish, I would want to see the complete history of the people of Nephi. I think it's very exciting. And so Amram is passing this to his brother Chemish. Now Chemish, he's not one much for writing. He writes a single verse. He just records that he saw what his brother had written and that it is a true record, and that's it. Just that little bit. It looks like it's 2 sentences long. Yeah. Now, Abinadab, he writes a little more. He says that he had taken many lives with the Lamanites. He's the son of Chemish. And he adds something here that I find interesting. He says, the record of the people were engraven upon plates, which is had by the kings according to the generations. I know of no revelation save that which had been written, neither prophecy. Wherefore, that which is sufficient is written, and I make an end. And boom. Finally, we get to Amaleki. Now, Amaleki is the more of the studious writers. He finishes this off, and this is a, let's see, 20, 30 verses. So here, excuse me, here, Amaleki will take from chapter 12 to verse 30. So 18 verses, and he covers a lot in such a little period. So Amaleki is the son of Abinadab, as we discussed earlier, and he says he wants to talk about Mosiah, who was made king over the land of Zarahemla. Now, Mosiah lived in the town of in the land of Nephi at the time, and he really wanted. He seems like he's a righteous man, and in a dream, God decides to send him away, and so in a dream, he tells him to flee. And we see here in verse 12, he says that, behold, he being warned of the Lord that he should flee out of the land of Nephi, and as many as would hearken unto the voice of the Lord should also depart out of the land with him into the wilderness. Now, this means that the land of Nephi, the inhabitants at this time are so wicked that a righteous branch must be preserved. So a branch is broken off and grown and planted in another area. So that's it's interesting how I can fit the olive branch into this. So we take the main tree, which is Israel, okay? And we break off a branch, plant it somewhere else, okay? Boom. Now, we take that branch, which is now a tree itself, and it's starting to become bad, so God breaks off another branch and plants it a little further away. So now we have the tree, a branch of the tree. Okay? Now it gets more complicated. And he did according to the Lord, in verse 13, commanded him, and he departed out of the land into the wilderness, And he took as many of them as would hearken unto the voice of the Lord. And they were led by many preachings and prophesyings, and were admonished continually by the word of God. Now, he also takes the brass plates, or even maybe all the records. It doesn't really say. Later it does say that they did have the brass plates, and they were led by the power of his arm, and led into the wilderness, and came to a land called Zarahemla. And Zarahemla, so the man there was a man, Zarahemla, who lived at the same time as, has the same time as Nephi and Lehi and them. And they got the name Mulekites because of the son of the king. His name was Mulek. Now, I normally don't talk about archaeology on this, because I believe the spiritual should be investigated first, should be thoroughly, should be your foundation. A spiritual testimony of the gospel of Jesus Christ, of the Book of Mormon, should be spiritual first, physical evidence second. So the physical evidence should support the spiritual. And we see this. There are tons of archaeological evidences supporting the Book of Mormon. And there's also so much internal evidence that I don't see how people can deny it. There's just so much. So Mulek is the son of King Zedekiah. And outside of Jerusalem, a while back, they found a ring. It was a ring that was a royal ring, and it had the name Mulek. Now, this made big strides in the LDS scholars, and was utterly ignored by the world. Of course, who wants evidence of the Book of Mormon, that if you're friends with the world? I prefer being friends with God. All right, so Mulek and the people that traveled with him, we have no record of how long they traveled, which directions, what trials they went through, how the Lord admonished them, supported them, and we have none of that, which I wish we did, but we don't. But Mosiah comes across this town. Now, Zarahemla was the name of the man who led them, because evidently Mulek was too young to lead. He may have been one of the youngest sons of King Zedekiah. And he led the whole party. He must have been a righteous man. He must have been, I would think, maybe even a prophet. I don't know. But they were carried across the land, and when they landed here in the New World, it's where they built the city. Now, you got to remember one thing. At this time, this is roughly about 150 AD. Let's go up here and see. It's about 130 AD. And so you've had nearly 470 years have passed since Lehi and his family. So all this, it would be nice to have. I am such a nerd when it comes to stuff like this. I wish we had more records. And so we'll continue on now. So the people of Zarahemla came out at the same time, and they discovered this land, and the Lord led them here. And they lived here, and then while Mosiah was traveling in the wilderness, they happened to come across Zarahemla, and it's recorded in here in verse 17. He says, and at the time that Mosiah discovered them, they had become exceedingly numerous. Nevertheless, they had many wars and serious contentions, and fallen by the sword from time to time, and their language had become corrupted, and they had brought no records with them, and then they denied the people of their Creator. So because they had no record of God with them, because they probably left in much more of a hurry than Lehi and his people, because they had some time to prepare. My guess is Zarahemla and Mulek left literally at the time that Babylon was attacking Jerusalem. They escaped. Now, one thing to remember is, so Jeremiah records this, and in it, I think it's in Jeremiah, I'll have to double check, but it records that all the sons of Zedekiah were killed. Now, you got to realize this is not prophecy, or this is not revelation that they're writing this, that Jeremiah's writing this. He's writing it as history. And as far as he knew, all the sons of the king were destroyed. It's only through the Book of Mormon and the archaeological evidence that we realize that one of the sons had escaped. He may have been the baby of the family. He may have been born just maybe even within a couple years, possibly. He was just too young to realize this. And so that's probably why people think that all the sons of Zedekiah had died. And that's why I'm glad that for this additional information, saying that at least one son lived. I'm not saying the Bible's wrong. It is the part of Jeremiah. Jeremiah is a prophet. He's also a historian. He's writing down the history of the people at the same time. So when he records that all the sons, that is what he believes. He didn't realize that one escaped. All right. Verse 17 will continue. They had many wars and serious contentions, and had fallen by the sword from time to time. Their language had become corrupt. Now, we know languages change. We study English from what it was when it first came to be, and no one today, well, a very few people that actually study the ancient English would be able to understand it. the common people like you and I, no, we wouldn't be able to understand a single thing. Now, I had a book years ago. This was when I was first getting active in the church, of English that was written in the early 18th century. So the book was actually 1706, I think, is what year. And I had a hard time reading it because some of the letters we have now don't look the same. So languages change over centuries. I'm sure if in 400 years, if someone was to look at English as we have it now, they'd be like, what gibberish is this? All right, so their language is taught, or is corrupted, since they had no record to come with them. And the sad part is they denied their God. Maybe they had adopted some pagan gods of their own creation. We really don't know. It is in our DNA to worship. Either we will worship God as we know Him, we will worship the earth, the elements. There's always something for us to try and follow and worship. And atheists will say that they don't worship anything, but yeah, they do. They worship science. They worship their wealth, their possessions, or they worship themselves. It's a growing trend where I am God. No, you're not God. But we'll leave them be. So Mosiah had the great task of straightening out the people. So he taught them their language, which probably had changed at this time. Some. I would love to see what the difference would be of the Hebrew and Egyptian that Nephi brought with them to what they were at the time of Lehi, or at the time of Mosiah. So Mosiah caused them to be taught his language, and Zarahemla gave genealogy of his fathers according to his memory, and they were written, but we don't have them. Maybe Zarahemla was the person they were talking to. I don't know. There's so much I'm learning about this. Now, the people of Zarahemla decided to make Mosiah king over their people. And so he accepted. And then they bring this large stone with them, engravings, and he did interpret them. And the stone is what the records we have that constitutes the, if I'm correct on this, constitutes the Book of Ether. Okay, so he records here in verse 21, he says, and they gave an account of one Coriantumr who had been and the slain of his people. Coriantumr was discovered by the people of Zarahemla, and he dwelt them for the space of 9 moons. I'm hoping enough people understand what 9 moons means. It means 9 months. So he didn't live very long with them. And we will read his record later in the Book of Ether. And then he records that it is a record of his first parent, Coriantumr's first parents, who were from the Tower of Babel, all the way to when they die. And Amaleki records here that we'll just read the whole verse. It says 22. It says, "And also spake a few words concerning his fathers, and his first parents came out of the tower. At the time the severity of the Lord fell upon the people according to the judgments, and they were just, and their bones were scattered on the lands in the northward." Then he records, Amaleki records that he was born in the days of Mosiah, and I have lived to see his death, and Benjamin his son reigneth in his stead. Now, verse 4, he records that there's much war and contention between the Nephites and the Lamanites, insomuch that King Benjamin did drive them out of the land of Zarahemla. And he records here, Amaleki records here, and he says in verse 25, he says, "And I began to be old, and having no seed, and knowing that King Benjamin was a just man before the Lord, wherefore I shall deliver up these plates unto him, exhorting all men to come unto God, the Holy One of Israel, and believe in prophesying, and in revelation, and in the ministry of the angels, in the gift of speaking with tongues, and the gifts of interpreting languages, and in all things which are good. For there is nothing which is good save it come from the Lord, and that which is evil comes from the devil." So we're getting a little preaching here from Amaleki. He continues in verse 26, and he says, "And now, my beloved brethren, I would that ye should come unto Christ, who is the Holy One of Israel, and partake of his salvation and the power of his redemption. Yea, come unto him, offer your whole soul as an offering unto him. Continue in fasting and praying, and endure to the end. And as the Lord liveth, ye will be saved." And then he records here, he says, "And now I would speak somewhat concerning a certain number of went up into the wilderness to return to the land of Nephi. And there was a large number who were desirous to possess the land of their inheritance." And he continues, he says, "Wherefore they went up into the wilderness, and their leader being a strong and mighty man, and a stiff-necked man, wherefore he caused a contention among them. And they were all slain, save 50, in the wilderness, and they returned again to the land of Zarahemla. And it came to pass that they also took others to considerable number, and took their journey again to the wilderness." And then Amaleki records this. He says, "And I, Amaleki, had a brother who also went with them, and I have not since known concerning them. And I am about to lie down in my grave, and these plates are full." And I make an end of my speaking. So he ends it on a sad note, that he had a brother that was part of this last bunch that took off, and he had not seen him since. I can't even imagine being without my brother. As kids, we drove each other's nuts. You know, we still do that, but we're closer. And I'm thankful for him. All right. that's the end of Omni. Tomorrow we will start in the words. We will work on the words of Mormon. You guys have a wonderful evening. Get plenty of sleep, and we'll see you tomorrow.